Greetings, traveler. Have you ever been in a situation in Dungeons and Dragons when each player, when their turn comes to say what they do in combat, they just start thinking about their abilities and their moves and all the possibilities of what they could do, and the more they think about it, the more time it takes for them to reach a decision, and the slower combat feels for everyone. So today I'm going to share with you my simple trick for handling the situation. I'm going to start by giving you some context about generally when this happens, what the hard mode of dealing with the situation is, and finally I'm going to introduce my way of turning all this extremely easy. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 13 years now, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for about twice as long, almost exclusively as a dungeon master. And back in the early days of my DMing, I would very often come upon this situation where, in the group, some people have a really good understanding of the D&D rules, some of them not so much, but even if they do, because there's so many options in Dungeons and Dragons in combat, and the game rewards out-of-the-box thinking and original ideas and crazy acrobatics and all that, it's often very easy to get lost as a player in all these choices. So what the hard mode of this is trying to conduct a game while whenever someone's turn comes, it takes anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes for them to decide what it is they want to do. They start looking at their character sheet, they go through the abilities, they don't remember how it works, they start looking in the player's manual or the player's handbook for what exactly each spell does and how each ability works, and then they start discussing with the other players what they should do and what's best and what's a good idea in this situation. Long story short, this takes a long time. And then finally, when that player's turn comes to an end, the next player basically repeats the same thing. What should I do now? And I don't remember my abilities and so on. So doing this the hard way basically leads you into a situation where a single combat encounter in Dungeons and Dragons can take several hours. Now, is this necessarily a bad thing? Of course not. As long as everybody's having fun, nothing is wrong with that. But typically, for one session, unless it's this final, epic super duper combat encounter, you typically want combat to feel more fast and hopefully get 2 or 3 combat encounters per D&D session, with 2 of them feeling more fast and light, and 1 of them being a more meaty, more tactical sort of situation. So this is how to create this fast-flowing combat, not just for the less important combat encounters, but also for deeper experiences when doing these very, very important combat sequences. So how can we make this quick? I was thinking, why is it that for some players it takes so long to decide what to do, but for me as the dungeon master, I could always tell immediately what each NPC did in combat. So I could decide faster for, let's say, 10 NPCs what their actions are, but a player could not decide for a single player character what that character's actions are. So it would take me no time to come up with the next action of that NPC, while the player would take several minutes. And I thought, well, why is there such a big difference? There's not a big difference between the capabilities of PCs and NPCs. So what is it? And then I was looking at the monster manual, and specifically the section where it talked about the general behavior of these monsters in combat, or these NPCs in combat. So usually first they want to, target this type of character. Then they want to use their XY ability to do whatever. So because I had this prepared beforehand and I had it in my mind before starting the combat, it was very easy to say, this monster first does this, then does that. I could remember it easily. But when I looked at what players were doing, especially in the time when it wasn't their turn, they were not basically thinking about that. They were just kind of spacing out and enjoying the conversation and other people role-playing and all that stuff, and just observing the spectacle of combat, and not really thinking about what they want to do on their turn. Also, because of the initiative system of Dungeons & Dragons, sometimes they wouldn't know when their turn is, or they wouldn't remember who goes after whom and so on. So they didn't know when their turn will come, and they didn't know what to do when it did. So I thought, how can I incentivize people to, when their turn comes, be immediately ready to say, I do this. I cast this spell, I do this attack, I move to this location. All that very, very simple information, to have it ready immediately when their turn comes. I tried several things, and what worked in the end for me was coming up with something called the readiness bonus. So the readiness bonus, this was back in 3rd edition and 3.5, was a +2 modifier to the first action the player would take on their turn, assuming they knew exactly what that action would be. So if they could say something like, I move to this square and I shoot that goblin with my bow, or if they say, I hide behind this rock and I cast fireball, if they could say that right away, then they could apply a +2 modifier to whatever their action is. And in the beginning I thought, is this okay to, give such a big bonus for no reason? I kind of felt weird about it. I thought this would break combat, people would abuse it, and so on. This was my skepticism before trying the system. As soon as that system went into effect and the players understood the benefit, and especially being frustrated with low rolls or just missing the enemy by 1 or 2 points on the dice roll, when they realized that they could get this bonus seemingly for nothing, for free, then, to my huge surprise, I noticed that the players would, on their downtime, when it wasn't their turn, would be looking at the character sheet, looking at the player's handbook, understanding what what they can do, understanding what's most effective on their turn, and so on. And when their turn came, immediately they could say, oh, I do this, because they could feel the benefit. Now, would it work 100% of the time? Of course not. Sometimes still there was some situation that needed a bit more thought, or the situation changed so drastically between the player turns that the action they had prepared wasn't applicable anymore. But let me just say that for 90 or 99% of the time, this made combat feel faster than me deciding the actions of the monsters I was controlling. So the players were, of course, because they knew their characters so well, they had the actions of their characters ready consistently on every turn. So this is what we did back then, but for later editions of D&D, similar things worked. Having some bonus die the player can roll, or again a modifier of some sort, worked wonders when it came to the player readiness. Now, I thought of this system. I don't think I'm the first person to have discovered this system or something similar. So from conversations I had with other people out there, other players and DMs, they have described using similar systems. But this is something that I used, and it had such a profound effect on how quickly combat went by that basically in most cases combat felt the same speed as a video game, where you just click 1 or 2 buttons per turn and you just move through the turns very, very effortlessly. So I hope this gives you an idea if you're struggling with the speed and the pace of combat in Dungeons & Dragons, and it makes your games feel faster and more fluid and more fun in the future. Anyway, that's it from me on this topic. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, have fun.